प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
We continue with chapter 3, Karma Yoga, and here is the essence of the verses 19 and 20, the translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Tasmat asaktaha sadatam karyam karma samachara asaktahi acharan karma param apnoti purushaha. कर्मणा एव हि संसिद्धिम् आस्थिता जनकादयः लोकसंग्रह एव अपि संपस्यं कर्तुम् अर्हसि. Here is the English translation. Therefore, remaining unattached, always do the action worthy of performance. Engaging in action truly unattached, man attains to the Supreme. Again, Bhagavan is saying, therefore, remaining unattached, always do the action worthy of performance. Engaging in action truly unattached, man attains to the Supreme. Next verse. By action alone, indeed, Janaka and others gained perfection. Moreover, even looking to the welfare of the world, you should perform action. Again, Bhagavan is saying to Arjuna, by action alone indeed Janaka and others gained perfection. Moreover, even looking to the welfare of the world, you should perform action. Now let us go back to the last verse, the verse number 18, where we left off. Neither has he any profit to gain in this life from the actions he has done or from the actions he has not done, nor is there any living creature on whom he needs rely for any purpose. So here Bhagavan is speaking about the one who is firmly established in the self, the eternal being. And he is speaking about this man who is thus contented in himself and still continues to act in the world. His behavior has become natural behavior and is no longer motivated by selfish desires, nor is its effectiveness disturbed by any shortcomings that might arise from dullness on his part. Bhagavan says that such a person is fulfilled. He has fulfilled the purpose of all possible desires and all possible actions in his life. And he now engages himself in actions motivated not by selfish individuality but by cosmic purpose. And through him works the divine intelligence, for now he has become a fitting instrument to carry out the divine plan in the world. Such a life is a natural life, and it is the result of the established intellect. So now Bhagavan is continuing in verse number 19, and he is telling Arjuna to therefore remaining unattached, always do the action worthy of performance. Engaging in action truly unattached, man attains to the Supreme. So he is telling Arjuna, as you are already uninvolved and you are already detached and you are separated as you naturally are from the field of action, now you perform action worthy of performance. Here Bhagavan is proclaiming that freedom is there. It is natural to man. This freedom is natural to man. Man's life is already in liberation, and no effort is needed for the attainment of freedom because it is already there. And so he is urging Arjuna, now you perform action in the state of this freedom. Bhagavan further says, action worthy of performance may be considered on 5 different levels of life. 1. Action during the ordinary waking state of consciousness. 2. Action when self-consciousness has been gained and is developing into cosmic consciousness. 3. Action in the state of cosmic consciousness. 4. Action which helps cosmic consciousness to develop into God consciousness. And 5. Action in the state of God consciousness. So I repeat here again. So there is action during the ordinary waking state of consciousness, and then there is action when self-consciousness has been gained and is developing into cosmic consciousness, And next, there is action in the state of cosmic consciousness. And fourthly, there is action which helps cosmic consciousness to develop into God consciousness. And number 5, action in the state of God consciousness. So here this verse is mainly concerned with the last 3 levels of action. That is, the action in the state of cosmic consciousness, and the action which is helping cosmic consciousness to develop into God consciousness, and then the action in the state of God consciousness. So what is the most worthy of all these actions and worthy of performance is this quality of the action which is helpful for gaining the higher states of consciousness. Now let us look into the doctrine of Karma Yoga. The whole doctrine of Karma Yoga only asks man to be in his natural and normal state of self-consciousness and to be in his own nature. And Bhagavan is asking Arjuna to act, and this advice is in order to cultivate liberation in God consciousness. That means this whole action is to cultivate liberation in God consciousness. Here, the mind, moved by its own nature to enjoy more, flows towards the subtler fields of experience during transcendental meditation and most spontaneously attains the state of being. Here it is important to understand that once the state of being is attained, then any activity after this state of being is gained is likewise spontaneously carried out by nature. Therefore, the development of cosmic consciousness, which forms the basis of the supreme attainment of God consciousness, is a natural process and it is free from effort. Here, Bhagavan is speaking as the supreme God, and the supreme is one who is presiding over the relative and the absolute in the fullness of both. This verse further is reminding us of the 47th verse of the 2nd chapter. And here in this 47th verse, Bhagavan is saying, you have control over action alone, never over its fruits. Live not for the fruits of action, nor attach yourself to inaction. Again, you have control over action alone, never over its fruits, and live not for the fruits of action, nor attach yourself to inaction. Now, Bhagavan, in verse 19 of the chapter 3, is revealing the significance of unrestricted natural action on the way to the realization of God consciousness. The previous verses brought out man's ability to act in a natural manner by virtue of possessing cosmic consciousness. Now in this present verse, Bhagavan is showing that performance of action in an unstrained, natural manner is a means of realizing the Supreme. We have seen that in the state of cosmic consciousness, the validity of action is accepted for the sake of developing God consciousness. It is important that this verse should be studied very carefully in order to understand the means by which God consciousness may be attained. Here Bhagavan is saying The means should not be confused with the end. Cosmic consciousness, in which the self experienced as separate from activity, is not the end, nor is it the final state of development. It is just a means to God consciousness. Now let us see the sequence again. When through meditation the mind has reached transcendental self-consciousness and then returns from the field of absolute being, it becomes necessary for it to engage in activity. So in this way, the nature of transcendental being infused into the mind has an opportunity of maintaining itself even when the mind is engaged in experiencing the relative field of life through the senses. And this is how one remains permanently established in self-consciousness and thereby enjoys life in cosmic consciousness. Next, we understand that by this virtue of action, the transcendental divine nature is infused into practical life, making a man fully integrated so that he acts in the relative field of existence while remaining established in absolute being. Because he remains established in absolute being, then he is in a state of contentment, and his actions are then natural and normal, and they are worthy of performance. Next, when in the state of cosmic consciousness, the self has been realized as separate from all activity, the action worthy of performance is action in devotion to God. So here you must understand that we are talking about action worthy of performance in cosmic consciousness, in transcendental consciousness. So in the state of cosmic consciousness, the action worthy of performance is action in devotion to God. The activity of devotion is the highest and most refined type of activity, for it directly raises the awareness of separateness of being from activity as experienced in the state of cosmic consciousness to a unified state of awareness of God alone. So here the awareness of self and of activity, which is actually the awareness of the two. What are the two here? The self and the activity, or the self and the non-self, gives way to oneness in the awareness of God. And this happens in God consciousness. The duality of the self and the activity finds itself pervaded by God, and He alone remains, and He alone dominates life. And in the light of Him, permeated by Him, the self stands in unity with Him and with the whole field of action dominated by Him. And in Him are found united forever both the self and the activity of cosmic consciousness. Again, this is the oneness of the God consciousness. It's important to understand here that in the state of cosmic consciousness, when self is separate from the activity, the action worthy of performance is action in devotion to God. And this highest and most refined type of activity, which is called devotion, gives way to oneness in the awareness of God in God consciousness. The duality of the self and the activity or the self and the non-self, are pervaded by God, and all that remains is God. And everything becomes united with Him and with the whole field of action dominated by Him. So, this is the state of life in the oneness of God consciousness, expressed by the words, attains to the Supreme in this verse, which extols action in the state of cosmic consciousness. So now we clearly understand that all actions worthy of performance are those actions which have the quality and which are helpful for gaining the higher states of consciousness. Now finally let us see how this purpose of all activity is fulfilled. Again, Bhagavan is saying, one who has realized the self in transcendental consciousness, and one who has realized the self as completely separate from activity in cosmic consciousness, and one who has gained fulfillment by realizing the self in union with God in God consciousness, has reached the state where the purpose of all activity has been fulfilled. Because his self is fixed in the universal self, there is nothing he could gain from another. His self is uninvolved in every way. It is uninvolved with activity, and it is uninvolved with the selves of individual beings. His one self is the self of all beings. So again, having attained this union with God, his one self is the self of all beings, and this self remains uninvolved in every way and uninvolved with the activity, and it is also uninvolved with the selves of individual beings. And this is what Bhagavan says in verse 18, nor is there any living creature on whom he needs to rely for any purpose. Bhagavan continues, by action alone, indeed, Janaka and others gained perfection. Moreover, even looking to the welfare of the world, you should perform action. Here, this verse extols action. It extols action for its value to the world and as a means to eternal liberation from bondage. At the same time, it illustrates with concrete examples the abstract principles of Karma Yoga and their effects. Here, Bhagavan is speaking about the glory of action, and it is this glory of action that brought integration of life in God consciousness to Janaka and others and enabled them to do good to the world. Now Bhagavan said, it is the glory of action that brought integration of life in God consciousness. Now how does the integration come? Integration of life depends upon the mind passing in a cycle between the field of the Absolute and the field of activity. Now try to understand. The mind goes to the unmanifest and comes back to the manifest, thus experiencing both fields of life, absolute and relative. And this is the state of the integrated man in cosmic consciousness. And so, what was the success of King Janaka? And what is his secret of the integration of his activities. Here Bhagavan is saying, when King Janaka and others like him were found to be established in reality while fully active in the world, the secret did not lie in their continuous outward activity, but it lay in the fact that such activity was supplemented by their experience of the transcendent through the inward activity of meditation. So here again it's important to understand that the secret of success in the activity is not in the continuous outward activity. It does not lie in the continuous outward activity. The secret lies in that the activity is supplemented by the experience of the transcendent. Now, if we consider the march of the mind from gross outward activity to the transcendent, we can say that it is activity in the direction of putting an end to the activity that gives the mind the status of the absolute. Here, meditation itself is an activity, and in view of this, it can certainly be held that it is action alone that brings perfection. So here, try to understand again, through the activity called meditation, then the mind which is engaged in the outside activity moves in a direction where there is an end to its activity comes, and this is what gives the mind the status of the absolute. Now, how does enlightenment through action happen? The self is omnipresent and eternal. It does not need anything to realize itself. It's just that the man loses it by remaining in the field of activity. And therefore, in order to realize it, he has simply to come out of activity and then engage himself in the subtler fields of activity until he is completely out of the field of activity and in the field of the transcendent. And so this explains the principle of enlightenment through action. And again, what is this action? What is the action which is bringing in the enlightenment? It is the action of meditation leading to samadhi. When Bhagavan says, by action alone indeed Janaka and others gained perfection, he is referring that as a direct result of this inward activity of meditation, outward activity in the world becomes more successful and more perfect. What is the origin of the action? Every action starts from the subtlest stratum of relative life, which is almost one with the level of the absolute, with pure being. Again, every action starts from the subtlest stratum of the relative life. And what is this subtlest stratum of relative life? It is one with the level of the absolute, the pure being. And here it starts as a thought. The thought itself passes through many stages from the subtle to the gross. And at a certain stage, it reaches that level of the mind where it is consciously appreciated. And here it is consciously appreciated as a thought, and it may be further translated into speech or action. Now let us look at the power of the thought and the action which produces great success and spiritual freedom. Through the practice of transcendental meditation, the thought begins to be appreciated at a subtler level. And here, in this subtle state, the thought becomes more powerful and results in more successful action. So, thus, by direct experience of transcendental being, through the inward stroke of action during meditation, a man not only gains spiritual freedom but also greater success in the world. And what is the further benefit, not only to the individual but to the world through this? When contentment and serenity gained through this action of meditation produces harmonious and life-supporting influences, then it benefits not only the individual but the whole world. By raising man's consciousness, they fill his heart with universal love, which induces him to work for the welfare of the world in a most natural way. And here Bhagavan is saying, it does not need a long time of silent meditation to reach the transcendental being. One needs to take a dive within the self and be with the self for a few minutes, and the mind is infused with the nature of pure consciousness, which keeps it enriched through all the activities of the day. And so, this is the way to live the spiritual life which makes glorious even the physical and material aspects of life in the world. Now, here ends the essence of verses 19 and 20, chapter 3, Karma Yoga, translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Now I will add a few words. As Maharshi always says, knowledge is structured in consciousness, and so are also the actions. The actions are also different in different states of consciousness. One can rise, and one will rise above attachment, above greed, and be in complete freedom, performing all the actions in God consciousness. So until one gains there, one gets to there, it is important on a practical level to develop this awareness and keep performing the actions which are worthy of performance. As long as one has the vasanas and the desires, what we mean here are the individual desires, then one is bound to certain obligatory functions. So it is best not to avoid them and constantly endeavor to fulfill these obligations without the violations of natural law or being dharmic. Normally, one gets carried away by the powerful likes and dislikes, which are called ragadveshas, and these prevent one from doing what is right. And these ragadveshas also create much of the attachments and the aversions. So, what does one do then? One only wants to perform actions what one likes to do and avoids what one dislikes. And so many times the preferences of these actions will often conflict with your duties. So when Bhagavan says, be with established intellect, develop this discriminating intellect which is established in the self, then naturally this intellect will advise the mind to take the right course of action. On the level of the self-awareness, one should try to act without attachment. But this is not completely possible unless until one gains the higher states of consciousness. Now, reading the Puranas, we understand that there have been great masters and kings who have followed the path of action, the Karma Yoga, to realize God. And these were people like Janaka, Ashwapati, Ikshvaku, Prahalada, Ambarisha, and many others. And so here the important lesson to understand is that whatever actions are being performed should benefit not only you personally, but they should also be for the general welfare of all the people around you. The most important thing to understand here is that the nature is all supportive, and one should do the meditation and gain the higher states of consciousness to gain this full support of this almighty nature. This almighty nature, the Prakriti, which is the manifested God, is already constantly taking care of each one and providing for each one and providing all the needs that each one needs for living and existence. So the most important thing here is to be aligned to nature, gain the transcendental consciousness, and gain the full support of the nature, and that way life becomes easy and one does not have to continuously struggle. Everyone thinks that one has to be completely involved, completely attached, and completely in control to be successful with any work. But the opposite is true only when one is completely detached and leaves this sense of ownership and not be emotionally so attached. Only then the work becomes successful, and only then one can perform the task at one's peak possibility and capability. So here we need to keep in our mind the two outstanding examples. One is King Janaka, who was a true karma yogi and who was a great king who continuously was committed to enrich the life of everyone in his kingdom. He ruled a whole kingdom, and yet he was liberated, and yet he was unattached. And so is Bhagavan Krishna here, who also ruled a kingdom and yet was a sannyasi in his state, in his truest sense of the word. Here, sannyasi is a state. It's a state of existence, living with non-attachment and living in freedom. I will continue tomorrow. Jai Gurudev, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.
ज्ञानातिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञान